Welcome to the Extraordinary Marriage. Today, we are going to be talking about organization. Does that make you want to go, click? I'm not listening to this. But if you're like me, life goes crazy when we're not organized. It affects everything in our being. It affects our energy level. It affects our marriage. It affects everything we do. And let's be real. Nobody wants to be disorganized. But what we're going to talk about today with Amy Slenker-Smith, we are going to talk about how your organization affects your relationship and your whole household. Like, I get frustrated whenever I can't find something, but I'm not always the most organized person. So, frustration saps your energy. But let me tell you, organization affects your marriage because one person is a perfectionist and the other one is not totally, and it causes a lot of frustration. But how do you meet in the middle and how do you figure that out? I want to welcome Amy Slenker-Smith from Simply Enough. Hi, Amy.
Hello, Connie. Thank you so much for having me. This is great. Great intro for what we're going to be talking about, too. All of it I am in violent agreement with 100%. So thank
Um,
you.
Absolutely. So the first thing we're going to start with, we're going to start at problems and disorganization causes for us personal problems. So, what kind of problems does it cause each of us when we are disorganized? I'm thinking about my garage. That's my husband. I'm thinking about my closets, my drawers, my
Yeah.
office that you can't actually see.
Yeah, so I think starting from an individual perspective is a really good idea. And so often when I'm talking to people and I tell them what I do as a decluttering coach, they'll usually say, "Oh, my wife could needs you," or "Oh, my husband needs you." And it's, I think, human nature to see everyone else's clutter first. Maybe it's their kids' stuff. Maybe it's their parents, all the parents' hand-me-downs that they've received that their parents didn't deal with. That's really typical with like sandwich generation families. But what I always encourage people to do is to start with your own stuff because I've been on this decluttering journey for 18 years ish. And it's not because I'm a bad organizer or I've done a bad job. It's because there's always something, but you kind of reach a point where you're in maintenance mode. And I've been in maintenance mode for probably 15 of those 18, 19 years. And maintenance mode just means you are more mindful of what's coming into your space and you're more mindful of routinely getting rid of things. Like you're maintaining that balance. But when people are first getting started, they really want to start with their kids' toys or hubby's hat collection or all the things that really don't belong to them. And so so much more is caught than taught. A funny story, I was just talking with my niece this week. She's in her 20s. She's moving in with her partner and they're having some shared spaces now, right? And they have this great generous like master closet. And so we were talking through how she was going to do this. We were on FaceTime and she messaged me the next day with a video. She'd done a great job. And she said, "Now I just need to get him to get rid of some of his clothing." And I quickly texted her back and I was like, "Great job. I know you have shared goals for this space, which is wonderful. You both want this space to function." So, but what I want to encourage you to do is to make sure you are setting a really good example and that you are setting the example for him. Because when he sees this nice donation pile that you have created of things that you're going to take to the donation center next week, he will be much more apt to follow suit with actions and not words. And so start with that's a long way of saying start with your own stuff. So,
I like the words, honey, could you do this? Honey, could you choose 3 to 5 items out of your closet you know you're not working it, using anymore?
yeah,
Honey, could you? Because often we say, hey, you need to. You
right.
don't get as good a reaction to that, do you?
Yeah, no, you certainly do not. Like the way that you ask, I think has a lot to do with it. And with in that instance, what I was saying to her is like bring the take this even a step further. Bring the conversation to the shared goals that you have for this closet. You would both like to be able to get ready for work easily. You would both like to be able to walk into the closet and not have a bunch of stuff on the floor. You would both like to be able to find all your snowboarding gear whenever you need to pack it and go on the trip, and that you're not like scrambling at the 11th hour to look for things. Like, so bring the conversation to some shared goals versus the you need to do this, or even asking like could you do something, like bringing it back to how it's a shared goal and it's helping everyone to get out the door faster, to get the kids on the bus, to get to work on time, to get home on time. Like a clothing closet is just such a great place because it affects so many other aspects of your day and you don't even realize it.
I know my husband and I both had two different closets all of these years. And just about 2 years ago, we redid our bathroom and redid the closet. And actually, for the best use of space, we made a closet that is for both of us. So, like, he has
Yep.
one end and I have the other. And I do find it important to pay no attention to his end of the closet. Why?
True.
Because I don't want to hear it from him about my end of the closet. And
Yeah.
everything is a two-way street. It is like the beginning where you said we tend to look at the other person and what they're doing wrong instead of looking at ourselves. And that also goes back to the whole situation in marriage and having a closet, living a life together.
Yeah.
And before we pick at them and what we don't think they're doing right, we look at ourselves.
Yeah.
And so I really can't get all over my husband because I'm not so neat either. Now, I may stop and clean up, I think, a little bit more often. He'll be listening to this. But I think I clean up a little more often, and he always comes in and helps when I can't get it done.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I,
so,
I and I think that's where the actions, people see that in you. So to this day in our house, of the three, of my son, my husband, and I have the smallest wardrobe. But what that's done is just set an example for them to follow suit, but in their time. And that's, as women, that's not always our timeline, right? We've done something, so we want someone to follow suit really, really quickly. And that's just not always the case, especially when it comes to how people deal with their own stuff and the level at which it bothers them. For women, studies show it raises our cortisol levels, it raises our stress. We are much more apt to want to bring that down. Like clutter really stresses us out. The science shows it, and it works on us more than it works on men. So for my son and my husband, it doesn't work on them, mentally the same way it does on me. But with the work that I did first, by going first, by putting all of my clothing in one closet, by eventually getting all my clothing even out of the dressers. I am literally in one standard bifold door, 6 foot closet, not a walk in, just ordinary old closet. Everything is there together. And I remember this one season where my husband said to me, "Hey, which bins of yours are downstairs in our, off season closet?" And
mhm.
I said, "None of them." He goes, "What do you mean, none of them?"
Wow.
And yeah, and I had just done it quietly. I hadn't made a big deal out of it. I had just slowly worked my way out of there in my time to set that example. And I told him none. And he's like, "Oh." He said, "Well, I could do that. I could get to that point." And he saw that it meant I was saving like 2 weekends a year. I wasn't having to do that whole seasonal swap where you move the winter stuff downstairs and the summer stuff upstairs and vice versa. And I wasn't having to do that anymore. And he realized, yeah, I want that too. I want to get 2 weekends back here. I don't want to spend time doing this. But it was really, really enlightening for me to just say, none of them are mine. And instead of saying, "Hey, could you try to do that too?" I'd already done it. I'd gone before him. And that's what makes all the difference.
And
100% makes.
you let him make up his own mind. Because when we make up our own mind to do something,
Yeah.
and he looked at your closet and he thought, wow, that looks good. I would like to be able to
Mm.
find everything when I'm looking for it, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that that probably played into that too. He thought,
Yeah.
that looks good. I'd really like to have that. But sometimes, we have trouble having or being the same as our spouse. So I'm going to introduce some the personality styles because that's what I teach in the extraordinary marriage is the four personality styles. Well, so first of all, those personality styles, you have a top style usually, and that's what we're going to look at today. But after that, you have maybe a part of this one and a part of that one that goes into play. So no two people are the same, and you
Yeah.
can never figure out exactly what people are. But if you can recognize that top style, spouses can start to realize that their spouse is not there just to irritate them with that big mess.
That's
And
true.
and the fact that you said, this is women and men. And typically we talk about women being the person who cleans up the house and does that kind of thing, keeps
Mhm.
things organized. But the truth is, it's about personality styles because if you marry a man and you're a messy woman, thank goodness I didn't marry a super neat man because I would have drove him crazy. And if I was super neat, my husband would have drove me crazy. But we do end up in that instant where one is really neat and one's not. It's
Yeah.
not just to
So
irritate you.
true.
So there are four styles, and this is where I'm going to take you today. Is there are
Okay.
four styles. There is a D personality style, and they are that direct, that dominant person.
Okay.
Not always perfectly neat. So take that note. Then there is the I personality. They are fun-loving, energetic, like people, and they are not so neat and organized. So these first two styles, the D and the I, are very fast paced. So where does that
Okay.
take us? That takes us into the place they're in a hurry. They're busy. They got their hands in a little bit of everything. And so being neat and organized is not part of their name.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
let's just do those two styles since they are fast, like I said, always running around. And I know for me, like I remember keys back in the day. That would just be something everybody does. Who loses their keys? Who can't find their keys? Well,
Yeah.
that one tiny little thing, kind of like you were talking about the closet, that one tiny thing of keys, like I when I started having kids, I would leave my keys in the house. I'd get the babies, I'd get the bags, I got everything, but I'd get in the car and I didn't have my keys. And it drove me crazy long enough because when we're not neat or not as organized as those perfect people, that's what I call them. Those perfect people, it's not that we want to be that way. It's literally our
Yeah.
personality. And so one day, finally, after being fed up with not being able to find those keys, I'm like, what one thing can I could do? We can learn one habit at a time.
Yeah.
So one thing I could do was I'm gonna put my keys in my purse, in the pocket, in this pocket right here. I'm always gonna have a pocket for those keys. And every time I open the door of the house, I'm going to pop those keys back in that pocket. And,
Yeah.
today we start our car with a button. So we don't have to have our keys even. So I always know my keys are in my car. I'm in my car, in my purse. And
Yep.
all I have to do
In
is
that pocket.
grab at my purse and leave. And I always have my keys.
Yeah.
Hallelujah.
Yes. So good. So good. It's funny you say about keys. We lose on average 9 items a day. Keys, phone, sunglasses, paperwork, those are top of the list. I think it comes out to like 153 days of our life that we spend looking for lost things.
Mm,
And when it comes to something like keys, phone, sunglasses, where I always try to guide people is essentially what you said. But it's what is that one landing spot that you're going to have when you come in the home? Is it that you're going to put your keys right back in the purse? Is it, I do the same thing, my sunglasses, my keys. I have a parking spot for my phone in my house, which is on my way to grabbing my purse to going out the door. So your muscle memory is super important. I have seen where folks will have a place for sunglasses and keys and whatnot, but it's by the wrong door. It's by the door they don't use on a
mm.
regular basis. Maybe they go out through the garage and this is by their front door or vice versa. And so I always ask, like, what muscle memory is already in place? Which door are you using? And what you want to do with these habits is eliminate as much friction as possible. And so if you come in one door, going to the other door to deposit the things and let that be your landing spot isn't going to work. It's our human nature is it's too far. and we're programmed to go in and out the back door, and that's the way it's going to stay. So it's so interesting you said that about the keys. That's a really common one that people talk about losing. And there's a way to their habits are really a big part of the clutter. It's not just, decluttering and organizing and getting stuff out of your home. It's then how do you establish these habits and these zones where things live, where you give definition to my purse lives here, the sunglasses live here, the keys live here. And then there's no question mark about where they are, at any given time.
Well, I know in our house, we do have a parking place for the purse
Okay.
and everything else. And
Nice.
my husband does have a parking place for his keys and everything else. You know what I
Yep.
mean? So
Unload the
you end up
pockets. I get you.
piles and receipts and stuff everywhere. And yeah. So do you have any more tips for that?
Yeah, I think it is, some of it is adapting to the way that the other people in your house function. So as you can imagine, someone like me who's a decluttering coach, I have all the systems and ideas in the world, but my systems and my habits are different because my personality, to your point, is different than my husband and my son. And so, what we've got to do is build systems that will work for those people. So, when my son was young, I said, okay, I'm like, there's this bin in the garage and your shoes go there. Like, that's it. Like, just if the shoes can, like, if you can aim for the bin and toss them in there, that'd be great. That's all I want you to do. We made the system like really user friendly for him. Frankly, it's very user friendly for my husband. He's not opposed to throwing his shoes in a bin. Now, as my son is older and all of us are able to use a slightly more advanced system, I guess you might call it. As recently as about 2 months ago, I put a new shelf in our mudroom where I found all the shoes were kind of accumulating. It's our mudroom and our laundry room.
Yep. We have a lot of shoes. We have a lot of
Yes.
shoes. That's a problem, right?
It certainly is. And we can definitely talk about that too. But what I did when we redid that room, kind of like you were talking about with redoing your master closet, when we redid this laundry room, mudroom area, I left half of it empty. I didn't put up new shelves. I didn't install cabinets, nothing, like virtually empty. And I waited to see how we used the space because I thought, well, bags might get dropped here, shoes might get dropped here, but I wasn't really sure. And so I observed how we used the space for literally about a year. And then I thought, okay, the answer is shoes. Shoes are how we're using this space. And some laundry was getting dropped there. So I needed a small basket for laundry and I needed a shelf for shoes. And I knew exactly the size. And it just made for so much better of a solution. But the other reason it works is because my son's 19. So when he was 9 or 7 or 6, that kind of shelf was like too perfect for him. That's a system he wasn't necessarily going to adopt. And so as he's gotten older, I've been able to kind of up level my systems and we've graduated from just chucking them in a bin. Let's put it that way. So that's kind of a nice change, but it is really meeting people where they are. And if your husband if he's going to drop keys and receipts and wallet and all of that, give him a containment device where he can do so. Just make it easy for him. So that would be my advice on that.
So it's not all over the counter or that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Exactly.
I'm no better. I have my dropping spot and I'm no better. So you see what I mean on that.
Mhm.
But I was thinking about two different things. One is that you are raising a man who has organization. He's learned that
I hope
and
so.
he's pleasing. He pleases his mom. So if he pleases his mom, he'll please his wife
Yeah,
because, we are whatever we grow up as,
I
right?
know.
So you're
Mhm.
doing good, Amy. You're doing good on
Thank
that.
you. I
Um,
hope
I
so.
I was thinking about, I was talking to my daughter, and she was working on her bathroom area in her house, and she was talking about getting laundry. The husband, sorry, husband, but the husband putting his laundry into a hamper. And
Mhm.
so, because I was talking about a DI personality, because I was talking about that DI personality and I knew who he was, I'm like, well, you know what? Does that laundry basket, he might hear this, but does that laundry basket have a top on it? And she's like, yes. I'm like, well, you need a laundry basket with no lid on it
That's right.
because the D and the I are in a hurry and they're going to drop their laundry in if it's totally convenient. And
Yep.
if they have to lift that lid, it sounds like nonsense, but if they have to lift that lid, there's going to be days they don't lift it because they're in a hurry.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what she did. A laundry basket with no lid, even though you don't want to see the laundry, it's better that at least it's in the basket.
Absolutely. This is picking your battles 100%. Like it all being in one hamper together that you can then pick up versus having to pick it up off of the floor, which is where it will end up. And I think that it isn't all it I think personality certainly does play a part in this too. But I think too, Connie, it's just the amount of friction there is to getting to doing something. And when we lessen the friction, and make things easier, the habits are more likely to stick. So when you're trying to establish a habit, you lessen all the friction points. So you make sure the key hook is right by the door you're coming in, not by a different door. You eliminate that friction. And then conversely, when you're trying to stop a habit, you add friction. So this is all James Clear of Atomic Habits, who I'm a huge fan of,
I've
but
read that, love
yeah,
it.
I use it. I use it all the time when it comes to setting up systems because it's one thing to declutter and organize, but how are you going to maintain it?
Hmm.
And laundry might be one of the most popular topics that I talk about when it comes to organizational challenges, if you will.
And that's
So,
because we all have laundry. My youngest son has 10 kids.
oh my gosh, that's
Can you
amazing.
imagine washing that much laundry? I mean, yeah, that's has to be so much laundry. Yeah.
Usually with laundry, it's not really a laundry problem. It's usually a too much clothing problem. And so not recently, but over the years, I've really tried to migrate to just a single laundry day. And now, admittedly, there's only three people in my family, but I didn't want to feel like I was doing laundry every single day. I wanted to have a day where I did it, I hung it up, I dried it, I folded it, like start to finish. I knew that that was going to be a significant part of that day, but then it wasn't going to be a part of the other 6 days of the week, which
And
meant
I,
I could get other things done. And it's so interesting when I did a speaking event, there was a woman who had 10 kids. And as everyone in the audience is kind of, poo-pooing my idea of one day, she, at the end of my talk, she goes, I just want you to know that I have 10 kids and we do all of our laundry in one day.
woo woo,
She does it that way.
get
And
it over with.
she does. But what they also have done is they have made sure that the size of wardrobe that each child has is manageable. So I think where we get in trouble with laundry is when you have too much clothing, you're just going to let it pile up. You know you have 2 weeks worth of clothing, so you don't do it. And it's very counterintuitive and it's sometimes very hard, to explain to people, but less clothing if you have less clothing, it means you will have less laundry to do. If you intuitively, if you think you only own 5 towels, you only ever have to wash 5 towels. So having 10 or 15 towels just creates 15 towels worth of laundry instead of five. And so it's a very countercultural way of thinking, but when people come to me with laundry problems, I always go to, I think you have a too much clothing problem. I think you have too much clothing in your closet, and that's where we need to start. And the laundry problem will solve itself.
Okay, so that's an ouch for me because, I'm a bargain hunter and I probably have a few too many clothes. And but I definitely
I get it.
see how when you have less, then you can keep your closet organized and you have
Yeah.
less laundry. And my daughter did, we I have three grown kids, and when we're growing up, taking care of our family and they're growing up, we tell them and we teach them and we emulate so they can learn. But then after they get grown and they have their own families, you know what? They give us some tips once in a while, right?
Sure.
And my daughter
Sure.
said, now, mom, because she knows I have a lot of clothes, she's like, now, mom, for everything that you purchase, you need to throw one thing out. And of course, I was like, I don't think so. No. But
I like the way she thinks. Yeah, I
every
like the way she thinks.
every once in a while, I'll do that where I will stop and go, you know what? Let me pull out 3 to 5 items today that I'm not wearing anymore because there's a lot in my drawer that would definitely be the truth of. Sometimes we reminisce on, well, I remember when I got this and I wore this and it made me feel so good. And,
Yeah.
there's different crazy reasons we keep stuff that's not quite fitting or really not in style anymore.
Yeah, it is. Like we could probably spend the entire podcast just talking about clothing and ways to tackle that. And I was talking to a potential client recently, and she was talking about her closet, and she said, I look at the things and I think, but I might need it someday. And she's like, how do I get out of that mindset? And I said, I want you to think about who else might need it today. I want you to
Mm.
think about, yeah, I want you to think about the person who who would buy this at a thrift store, would buy this at a Goodwill or at a donation center. I want you to think about the dignity you give them to purchase nice things from a place like that, because that's where they have to shop. Their economic status is such that that's where they have to shop. But you are giving them the dignity to purchase nice things. And another phrase that really stuck with me through my own decluttering journey was that when we hold on to things that we are not using, we prevent them from being useful to someone else. And so that's the excess in our closet, is that it's not just that we're not wearing it. It's that if we have nice things that could go to someone who could wear it today, it could make a difference, in the job interview they go to, it could make them feel a little more put together because they've been able to purchase, something really nice at a Goodwill store. That's the way I like to think of where my stuff is going. Now, I will, I'm sure, get all kinds of comments on, but Goodwill sells it, that I don't like to support this. I don't like to support that. I don't subscribe to that. I think that the donation centers, the Goodwills, the Salvations of the Army are in business because as a culture, we buy a lot of excess. And
Oh,
they are
yeah.
there. They are there because they fill a need. They also have the ability to be very, very picky because they don't have to accept the stained and torn items because they get so many donations. So, if that's really a concern for someone who's listening, I want you to think about when you bargain hunt. Connie, I want you to think about when you bargain hunt. Does it really make sense to bring that extra into your closet? And when you do so, I love what your daughter said, like one in, two out. When you're trying to create like some margin, make it easier to get ready in the morning, step into your closet and say, everything here I wear and I love. And it just changes the trajectory of your morning completely. So that's my little soapbox on clothing.
Well, number one, if you're afraid of who you're donating to, then find one that you do support.
Absolutely. Oh, yes. Absolutely. Do a little research, find a donation center you feel good about, and stick with it. Like make one decision about that, because the decision fatigue that people run into when they're trying to decide where to take their things. I'll often start with clients who say to me, but I want to thrift this, I want to consign this, I want to give this to Susie. Oh, I'm saving all this for my cousins. You can't do that when you have a volume of stuff, when you are just getting started. So, anyone who's in my world as a coach, they go to the donation center every week, rain or shine. Like, we're not overthinking this. There will be a time when you've made a dent in the volume of stuff that's in your home and you feel like you're regaining some control and maybe you're in maintenance mode. Sure, that would be the time to consider selling some things. But selling stuff is time consuming. It can be very demotivating if it doesn't go well, if people stand you up and don't come and buy it. So I'm always an advocate for, if debt is not an issue, and then donating is a much better way to go. It's much more motivating. You're getting volume out of your house. And to your point, find a donation center that you feel good about and go with it. And just don't overthink your decision.
And the second thing about what we call thrift shopping is that is like 20 years ago, that was only the people who had to go do that, go shopping that way. But
Right?
nowadays, people learn to not only stretch their dollar with bargain stores, but they learn, when you're shopping for kids' clothes, reselling and consignment is
Yeah,
like, I live in an affluent area, and that's a big thing is like selling those outfits, kids' outfits that cost way more than I would pay. Even my
mm,
daughter does that where she will buy consignment and have awesome little outfits, name brands and all that kind of thing. And
good
the
for
kids
her.
sometimes they wear it 3 or 4 times and then she just sells it again.
Yep.
And it's really talk about saving the earth or anything like that. It's like it's
Oh my
just the
goodness,
right thing
yes.
to do, isn't it?
It is, and that's the thing about doing this work in your own home is you reach a point where you're really intentional, and the sooner you reach this, the easier this becomes, where you're really intentional about what you're bringing into your home. Because where we start is that first it's donating routinely, it's getting stuff out every single week, but the second step that has to come really quickly behind that is how do you stop the inflow? Are you more intentional both with how you spend your time, with how you spend your money, with how you spend all of your resources, and purchasing something that is, secondhand is also keeping, to your point, that's a much more sustainable way of living. I know my friends who have teenage daughters, most of them are thrifters. They love
There we
doing that.
go.
They love the thrill of the hunt. They go to a store called Plato's Closet and they do really well there. And I think that's wonderful. I think they're setting a good example for folks like you and I. But the further you get into this decluttering journey, the more you realize the impact you can have positively or negatively as far as the environment goes. And that's sort of the season that I'm in is it's not just about not bringing things into my home because I don't want the clutter. It's because I'm really looking at my consuming habits and the impact of consumerism on me. We see 5,000 ads a day. You are
Hmm.
influenced by ads. The number is probably going up with social media, but
Yeah.
you're influenced to purchase. And what I find myself doing when I feel I'm being influenced by an ad, I will just say, advertising works. And it causes me to kind of pause, like my radar goes up, and I'll say, okay, would I have thought about buying that item if I didn't see the ad?
Hmm. Hmm.
And that's how I can be much more intentional about whether I buy
Pause.
it. Uh-huh.
Pause.
Hmm. Pause.
Well, okay, so as we look at that and we leave the D and the I personality styles,
Okay.
they're just the one who, when they see that ad, they're like, boom, they poke it, they buy it. If their card information is stored in their phone, it's bought. And
Yes. Yes,
and
they
s-
do.
and so that D and that I, like I said, they are in a hurry. They're not going to be as neat. And there's a whole lot more I could tell you on those personality styles.
Yeah, I
But
bet.
I want us to move to the other two styles. And
Okay.
these other two styles are methodical. They're much more methodical, and that means they think about things a lot more. They they usually talk at a slower pace. They're thinking about what they're going to say. They plan their day. They plan things, and they're bothered by people, the D and the I. They're bothered by people who don't keep their stuff together or
Okay.
spout off at the mouth too quickly or, you know, they're bothered by those people. So the S and the C, like I said, are methodical. They're the people who are consistent. The S specifically is very consistent. And so whatever their habits are, they're consistent at it. And then the C personality, they are the perfectionist. So
Mm,
somebody's listening, they're going, "Oh my gosh, that's me." So
yeah.
the perfectionist has an exact place for everything. It's like
Okay.
that it is ingrained in them. They're made that way. Maybe they left something on the table and they're so bothered with themselves that they left that on the table. And so if the C personality especially is married to that D and that I, there's a lot of friction that goes on in that family
Yeah.
because, when you object to something, speaking to your spouse or you speak harshly or you're nagging or you're constantly on somebody, then it causes a lot of conflict. And so as we move into the S and the C who are more easygoing, um, I want people to realize that we have to find that way to meet in the middle. And as I look at whether it's politics or a group meeting that you're in where you're making decisions, or at the office or in your family, the importance is to respect each person's strength and
Hmm.
pay attention and meet in the middle to be able to
Yeah.
compromise. So you could probably tell us a little bit, these S's and C's. They want to know a little bit more about organization, but do you have anything to add about how do they come together? How do they accept one another, and how do they come together?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting when as you're describing these, and I don't know enough about them just yet, as I told you before we started recording, but I would hazard to guess that I'm somewhere in that C and S category, and my husband is probably more in that D and I category.
DCC, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I think we probably are exactly that. And I also know from other personality tests that I have done and evaluations, I once had someone say to me who looked at my strength finders and my Enneagram, they said, Amy, there's really no other job that you could do other than this.
That's
So
not true.
I know I think they're right.
You might just be good.
I think that they just felt like they felt like I was wired for this. Like
Uh-huh.
this is the one I'm so well wired for. And I took
Okay.
that as very much so a compliment, because I think there's a lot to be said for that. But I work with people who are in all four of those categories. And I, as I mentioned, am married to someone who is the opposite. It's not always that the woman is the more organized. It can be, it can be the other way around. I have seen it in couples that I have worked with where it is usually that you are opposite. And what I try to do with that opposite in mind is I try to remember that for where my husband is coming from, and it's a little bit of what we talked about earlier, making the systems really work for
Easy,
him. Easy. I
easy.
have to make them easy. And if I made them easy for him, they're definitely going to be easy for my son. And it challenges me also to think about how I can help. A lot of times I have women who I'm coaching and they come to me and they're able to do most of the work, but then they run up against this opposition where they have to involve the other person. And so we do a lot of setting the example. We do a lot of their own stuff. And we can go months with just working on their own stuff. For anyone who's listening, I promise you, you have months worth of stuff to work on of your own before you start attacking the kids' toys, before you start suggesting that hubby come on board with you and take care of his hat collection. So I think that is really what this comes down to is really focusing on our stuff in the way that makes sense to us, but also knowing that it might not make sense to someone else. So my husband will sometimes say to me, "So Amy, um have you found a more optimal location for this thing?" And that's isn't it great? It's this very nice and diplomatic way of saying, "What the heck did you do with this? And where are you hiding it from me?" And I so appreciate that about him. And I, in turn, am doing a better job of saying, I reorganized this closet and now X, Y, and Z live there. I've moved things. So they're so used to the systems that I've helped to create that it's only fair that if I change the system that I tell them. And I think that that's something that can be very common with the more organized one of the bunch. If it's the woman, if it's the man, where you're leaving your spouse behind is when you don't communicate what you've done, because then they want to just throw up their hands and say, I can't possibly be a part of this. I can't create organization because he or she is just going to undo it. They're just going to correct it or fix it
Oh
or
yeah.
and so you end up frustrating them unintentionally. Like
Mhm.
you found a better solution and you know it works better. But if you haven't got buy-in from the other person in your house and you haven't talked through, and that's where I think these personalities too, the thing that I haven't mentioned yet is that there might be something that my husband says where he's like, have you thought about this? And I
Hmm.
have, yeah, and I haven't thought about it. 9 chances out of 10, I have not thought about it because his personality is different for me and his brain is wired differently. And when we allow them to actually have some part of the conversation and are a part of it where we say, I'm thinking about redoing this, they often help us create a better solution. And it's at least one that everybody knows. And when everyone knows it, you're much more likely to be able to keep that. And that's what creates the organization and that's what creates the habits.
And that's what's called communication. And I know my
Yeah.
husband and I have been married for 46 years.
Well,
And
congratulations.
what we have found is, we always naturally communicated. But what I found here in these latter years in different things we do at church and different business events we're involved in is that just what you said when he's working on something or he's having a challenge here or he's got something going on and we start talking about it, I present a whole different point of view. And
Hmm.
the same thing happens when I have something and he's, listening and he says something I didn't think about. And honestly, if we can start to understand one another and to
Yeah.
stop and listen to the other person and be, this is my cover it all word. Well, I have two actually. The first word would be respect each other
Yep.
and to do
Yeah.
everything in love,
Yeah.
everything with love. Then it kind of covers everything because you're going to compromise, you're going to listen to each other, you're going to respect each other.
Hmm.
We won't be able to be perfect, though. We just
No.
can't because we each are wired differently, literally wired
Yeah.
differently. And this has been so good talking to you on this because I think, this organization is good for my audience. And I would say probably understanding personalities is good for your audience.
100%.
Yeah,
So
so I
true.
really love it. It's been great. So, what is something that you would share as we're finishing today?
Oh gosh, so
What
many.
else?
Yeah, I know. So many options. I think that for most people, what I would suggest is that if they're feeling overwhelmed by their home and they're feeling overwhelmed by going through
Sometimes.
30 years worth of stuff, right? You've
Yes.
raised kids, you're launching kids, you're soon launching kids. You can see empty nest on the horizon. You're already in empty nest. Like that tends to be a lot of the people that I'm really talking to. And if you're in that season, what I would say is you really just have to start. And you have to start somewhere. And I would say start small, start with your own stuff and start in spaces you use daily. And that is just a way to get started. There's a scientific term that I don't remember. I think it's inertia, like a body in motion stays in motion. And
Oh, yeah.
sometimes the hardest part is just getting the first box of paper
Getting
out of
started.
the closet and starting to go through it. And I have had clients where I have said, all I want you to do this week is get the box of papers out of the closet and set up your workspace. I don't even care if you go through papers. Sometimes that small step is just enough to get them moving. And so when you're feeling, because most of them are feeling overwhelmed, they have, 30 years worth of stuff, and maybe they have, grandma's stuff and their parents' stuff too on top of it. And that is really my best advice is start small, start with your own stuff and start in spaces you use daily. If anyone's looking for a way to do that, they can go to my website, simply enough /5 days. It's a 5 day reset. um, Start small and builds a little bit, and that would be a great way for them to start. So I hope they'll check that out.
And once you get started, getting started is always the hardest.
It
And I
is.
mean, why do we fight that? And we finally start, we
Yeah.
begin, and we're like, that was not hard at all. That was like, I'm so glad I got it done. It feels so good, right?
It is. I think human beings are terrible, myself included. We're terrible at estimating time. We either think something is going to take such an eternity that we won't even start it. and we'll procrastinate a project and procrastinate, and then we do it, and it's like 20 minutes later, it's done. And we think, why did we wait so long? Or we dive into something thinking, oh, it won't take that long, and it's the opposite is often true. But I think that's just human nature. We're not always good at judging like how long something is going to take. And so for any space you're working on, the smaller the project you break it down into, take a big project, break it down into small sections, you'll get around that challenge. You'll always have time to finish a piece of it, and it'll give you the motivation, and it creates the motivation to keep going, and it creates momentum. So,
Satisfaction.
yeah, 100%. So true.
Satisfaction. So there's another book that I had read. It's called The One Thing. The
Yes.
One Thing. And so as I took a couple months off this summer and I'm just revving up, getting started again, but it's like, as I took that time off, I felt overwhelmed. I felt like there was just too many things going on. I had my hands in too many things. And so I went back to my book that I'd read and The One Thing. And it's simply, what is your one thing that you want to do today? We get all cluttered with all the
Yeah.
things or too much stuff around us or whatever it is bothering us. What is the one most important thing I should do today? And you might make a list of five or seven. And then, but what is the one thing? And often
Yeah.
we put off the one thing until the end. We'll do it tomorrow and the next day and the next day. And when we do our one thing, we get that good feeling inside that we've accomplished what we needed to, and it was the most important thing. And
Yeah.
then after that, what's next? Now, my one thing to do?
Yeah.
Amy, would you share your information for anybody who wants to maybe contact you or get in touch or to look into more of what you do?
Thank you. I appreciate that. So my website is simplyenough.net. That starter 5-day reset is simplyenough.net/5 days, the number five and days. And you can also find me on Facebook and Instagram. So Slinker-Smith on Facebook. So send me a friend request or just follow along there, and Simply Enough Amy on Instagram. So that's where
Perfect.
you can find
Perfect.
me.
And also, everyone remember that if you've been interested in that DI, those fast-paced, busy people, or the C and the SCs, and understanding that, and like Amy said, she and her husband are kind of opposite.
Yeah.
If you're finding some of that, there's a lot of things within this concept that reasons that you don't get along, reasons you have trouble organizing your stuff, reasons. And if you look into this and learn more about yourself and more about your spouse, I have a program called Rediscover Your Spouse. Rediscover Your Spouse, and it's
Very
at
cool.
theextraordinarymarriage.com. And what you'll find in there is a pre-recorded workshop, because when people are having challenges at home, they don't want everybody else to know
So
and they don't
true.
want to go get help. And too often they wait too long to go get help until they've irritated one another in such a way that they're in what I call the crazy cycle where,
Yeah.
they just can't get along because neither one of them are treating each other well. So if you
Yeah.
find yourself in that, or you even find a little frustration with your spouse, go to The Extraordinary Marriage and look up the Rediscover Your Spouse class. It's like a three
So
and a half
good.
hour class, 3 hour class. So you can watch it little by little. Thank you, Amy, for being with me today. I think this is a great benefit for the people
Thank you.
listening, and we'd love to hear from you. And be sure to subscribe to the Extraordinary Marriage podcast if you're finding this interesting. Thank you.
Thanks, Connie.